but otherwise, there we go. Otherwise, I'll get started in just a little bit. Thanks for hanging in there. We're on here, we're ready to go.
Hey, it still says people are in the waiting room. Are you guys able to open that?
Thank you, Nia.
Anytime.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us with the BlackDVM Network tonight, and I'm going to be sharing some lessons learned from the Veterinary Leadership Conference and why you should go next year. I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. I acknowledge and honor the ancestors past, present, and emerging of the Tuscarora and Catawba nations on whose stolen lands I live and work. This land has also witnessed the enslavement, torture, and systematic mistreatment of African people and their descendants. This is adapted from a statement by Lynn Lockyer Fisher at NC State. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Dr. Mariea Ross-Estrada. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am a 2006 graduate of Cornell University and served as the first treasurer of Voice in 2003. I treated dogs, cats, and some small mammals in private practice for 13 years in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., before joining the faculty at NC State University in December 2019. I'm primarily a clinical instructor working with fourth-year students in our primary care rotation. Over my career, and especially in the past 3 years, multiple opportunities have become available to me that seemed out of my reach. That I'm speaking to you today is truly an honor and a pleasure. I want to start by thanking the AVMA and the BlackDVM Network for allowing me to have this opportunity and awarding me with the AVMA Early Career Opportunities Scholarship. I didn't expect to attend the VLC as a representative of the BlackDVM Network. I was sure that a graduate or veterinary student would have a much more compelling story than mine when I applied. But upon receiving the news, my first thought was, what have I gotten myself into? Then what am I going to have in common with the delegates, practice owners, and veterinary association leaders? Because I wasn't attending just for myself, but also for my students and the BlackDVM Network members. I went out of my comfort zone and forced myself to network. You see, I'm an extroverted introvert. I'm energetic and outgoing with my students and colleagues, but I find it exhausting to talk to strangers. There is nothing more anxiety-inducing to me than walking into a room full of strangers, especially when most of them don't look like me. But advice from one of the keynote speakers helped put me at ease. I cannot emphasize enough how glad I am that I pushed beyond my fear. I gained valuable insights and formed connections that will help benefit my personal growth and hopefully yours as well. I'll share some of the highlights and resources from the presentations. I hope that you get something out of my Cliff Notes version of the lessons I learned, but also feel encouraged to attend for yourselves, as each year has slightly different speakers and topics for professional development. You might be thinking, why should I care about the leadership conference? I'm not a leader. So for my vet students, whether you realize it or not, you become a leader on the very first day of your job as you guide a team to provide patient care. And technicians, as you gain experience, you will train other technicians and assistants, and also early career veterinarians if they're smart enough to realize what they can learn from you. The keynote blew my mind. I didn't know what to expect, but it certainly was not this. It started with a square breathing exercise. Inhale for 4, hold for 4. Exhale for 4, hold for 4. Imagine doing that breathing exercise with the sounds of the ocean in the background. This multimedia experience was led by Dr. Betsy Charles. She was joined by Dr. Stephanie Jones, Garnetta Santiago, Dr. Bernard Hodges, one of the critter fixers, National AVMA President Hadia Martinez-Jaca, and Dr. Morgan MacArthur. I was proud and excited to see so many brown faces on stage. These veterinarians, technician, and veterinary student were from different backgrounds and professional experiences. But their common thread was that they all had a story to tell. Each story had elements of the everyday, but something in each also contained a transformational moment and was universal. I was transported into each of their stories and could empathize with them, even though my experiences differed. The audience was captivated. This keynote highlighted one of the themes of the conference, what's your story? And encouraged participants to engage in authentic conversations with others to learn theirs. Themes of their stories, such as empathy, listening for understanding, and universality, were repeated throughout various presentations during the weekend. Dr. Charles led us to the space between stimulus and response, in which you can choose a response, leading to growth and freedom. Dr. Jones described staying in the moment and listening to understand, having empathy for others. Dr. Hodges talked about how mentorship shaped his life. We shouldn't forget the profound effect that encouragement and listening can have on another's life, possibly reversing the effects of failure or missed opportunities. Just one conversation can change a person's life. Ms. Santiago discussed her imposter syndrome, the space between self-doubt and confidence experienced by many in our professions, me included. She described how a toxic environment nourished her insecurities and how, after leaving that workplace, her confidence, technical, and leadership skills grew. Hadia shared a story about empathy as a powerful advocate for the human-animal bond. Extending respect to every client and choosing to be part of the solution is how she's going to form her veterinary practice. Finally, Dr. MacArthur challenged us to refrain, rename, and reclaim the situation when faced with difficulties to avoid the slippery dark slope of resentment. We can also use gratitude and the power of choice to combat bitterness. The privilege of our profession is doing the hard and necessary work to help our patients. The purpose of the Making Your Mark session was to introduce some of the administration to up-and-coming leaders in the profession and inform us of lesser-known AVMA resources. I've been an AVMA member for 15 years, and I wasn't aware of any of the financial resources that Dr. Chaviant discussed. They also have a wide variety of resources to deal with cyberbullying. Dr. Chaviant started by challenging us to plan our financial strategies like we plan the rest of our lives. So yes, thinking about student loan repayment, insurance, and saving for retirement, things that we definitely do not want to think about as veterinarians. She also advised us to use a fiduciary advisor to manage our investments. Fiduciary advisors are obligated to work in our best interest by earning a flat commission, not a fee for every trade or transaction. And I'll come back to this slide at the very end so you can take down the resources for the debt-free Facebook group, some of the financial counselors, and the other advisors that provide services. Friday afternoon started with Dr. Mia Carey, CEO of Pride VMC, leadership consultant and friend of the BlackDVM Network. After Inclusivity First, she gave her Radical Candor presentation, which she shared with us last year. She started with a SMART call to action. one thing that each of us can commit to doing to be more inclusive. She created a journey guide for veterinary medical association leaders and also organized the Getting Comfortable Being Uncomfortable Padlet, which is a digital encyclopedia of sorts of allyship materials. I'll share the link to this resource at the end of my presentation, as she has been so happy that I want to share it with the network and then also with NC State University. She challenged influencers to move their organizations forward, examining the wheel of power and privilege, asking who may be excluded and how to bring them into the fold. This is why the wheel of power and privilege is one of my favorite resources, not just because it's beautiful, but how it can remind us of the power and privilege that we possess and the ways in which that we can help others, even though we may be marginalized ourselves. She also reminded us to center our allyship on the oppressed, not on ourselves, and to embrace our differences. She recommended books by Scott Page for those that need scientific proof of the benefits of diversity. In the diversity bonus, he demonstrates how different identities lead to cognitive diversity, and that cognitive diversity creates larger than expected products. So 1 + 1 = 3, not 2. In the difference, he challenges us to move away from looking for the smartest person to finding the group of people that can solve the problem. We also need to think beyond ethnic diversity by using open dyslexic font for presentations or websites, starting with land acknowledgement statements and sharing our pronouns, among other steps to be more inclusive. And while we're currently striving for a more equitable world in which everyone has access to the tools needed for success, our ultimate goal should be liberation, when all barriers are removed and no one needs additional tools to be successful. Leadership is a choice, so we need to be part of the solution. We can approach challenges with a growth mindset. So failures are nothing more than opportunities to grow because we're flexible and adaptable. We'll communicate with radical candor, and as the boss or the leader, we'll walk the talk, right? Do as we say and ask for feedback. As the employees, we should pursue active allyship and ask for help from our employers and our bosses. Everyone has something to learn and something to teach, especially if we focus on team communication. Next was conflict management with Dr. Addie Reinhardt, CEO of MentorVet, which is a veterinary mentorship and professional development program to promote well-being and prevent burnout in early career veterinarians. Conflict is uncomfortable and one of the most common sources of workplace stress. It doesn't always have a resolution or solution, so we have to learn how to adapt. But conflict can be positive. It can improve the quality of our decisions, increase innovation and productivity, stimulate discussion, build group cohesion and cooperation, improve conflict management skills, and promote individual development. And finally, we should explore our conflict management style, as each could be useful for certain situations. In her presentation, we did take a Blake conflict management style assessment, and I'll provide a link to that at the very end of this presentation. What conflict isn't is bullying, rudeness, or disrespect. These actions decrease creativity, performance, flexibility, and well-being. Bullying also leads to depression, stress, and burnout, which is one of the reasons why we have groups like Not One More Vet. Heavy workloads, lack of support, compromised patient safety, toxic culture, exhaustion, and anger lead to rudeness. But again, these are not conflicts. The causes of conflict are poor planning, lack of communication or miscommunication, poorly defined tasks and roles, scarce resources, competition, interdependence, value conflicts, and interpersonal or personality differences. There are quite a few ways that we can define problems, but one easy way is to think of them as being either solvable with easy solutions or perpetual, in which there are no easy solutions, or maybe it's a recurring issue or something that was a previously avoided solvable problem. If you use the cuneiform framework to approach problems, you can characterize them as simple with an easy solution, complicated, in which the answer takes some work, complex for no right answer, or chaos, in which there is no answer or understanding of what's happening by any of the involved parties. To solve the problems, we need tools that actually were taught to us in kindergarten. Using emotional intelligence, recognizing our emotions and those of our coworkers. Stopping and naming our emotions can help us know how to act in the situation. Practicing patience, humility, curiosity, and respect to navigate conflict. Mindful listening or listening to learn, and I'll have some slides on this later, can help because most people just want to be heard. Practicing reflective listening shows that you're not only engaged, but also understanding. Using phrases like, what I'm hearing is, or I heard you say that, can really go a long way. So for our solvable problems, first we need to define the actual problem, then determine what's within our influence, know our resources, identify the barriers, develop a plan of action, and then reflect on what went well and what we could do differently next time. For those perpetual problems, sometimes the only thing we can control are our reactions. So we have to do our best to adapt and get through the moment. Set aside a time so that you can discuss the issue when everyone is in better control of their emotions and can think rationally. Using positive and I statements can go a long way to connect the specific scenario to the bigger picture. Communicate what you personally feel responsible for and try not to take anything personally. One formula for what to do in these moments is, I think this. What do you think? Now let's make a decision. But if it doesn't go well at first, don't give up. Consider taking a time out and regroup. Ask when a more appropriate time would be to discuss the conflict. This session combines short presentations and questions from the keynote speakers with small group discussions to explore the skills needed to maintain the silver lining or positive outlook in our professional and personal lives. Finding common ground to make the connections necessary to build trust, rapport, and community. Our similarities are channeled through stories, which is how we communicate with each other as humans. There is something extraordinary, unusual, intriguing, and interesting in the mundane. So our experiences, especially the most personal ones, are universal. Remember, none of us is alone, and we don't have to carry any burden by ourselves. If we bring our voice to the next level, we can step out of our comfort zones. And the best advice I received during the conference was from Dr. MacArthur. A room full of strangers is a room full of stories that I don't know yet. If you're having difficulty accepting the outcomes of your decisions, think about, how do I make choices? Do I really have to do something? And is someone really forcing me into a position, or did I choose it? There will be some difficult conversations over the course of our careers. They can go a little bit more smoothly with intentional facilitation to lead people out of these awkward situations. To do so, we need to use empathy to stand in the space with them, validating their big feelings without trying to fix, minimize, or one-up them. We have to face and name our feelings. You can use a physiologic sigh, so a deep inhale with an extra short inhale before breathing out to override the systematic sympathetic hijack of the amygdala. When we're emotional, angry, or pitying ourselves, we're unable to make clear or rational decisions. So use this technique and sit with those big emotions for a few minutes before moving forward. And it's okay when a person is in distress to say, I don't know what to say. This is awkward, but I'm here for you. Acknowledging them and asking what they need really can go a long way, especially if you truly listen to them, being curious about them and suspending judgment, using statements like, tell me more, what did you mean by that? Or why did you put your words together like that? Try to think about the situation from their perspective. To combat negativity, remember the rule of 6. Because of negativity bias in our brains, the most negative thoughts or memories will be the most memorable. So when we're faced with these thoughts, try to think of 5 other perspectives or stories. And because we're often the hero of our own stories, sometimes we can get that truth from somewhere else, the real truth, if we think of the other perspectives. And then to undistort the distortion of these negative thoughts, just take a moment to breathe and process the situation. Maybe it's not all that bad. I went back to Dr. Reinhardt to learn more about mindful listening. Listening is the learned process of receiving, interpreting, recalling, evaluating, responding to verbal and nonverbal messages. And the best leaders will listen to serve the people that they work with. Mindful listening is an active, learned skill, cognitive process that requires our full attention. It is a deliberate choice in which nonverbal communication is very important and takes a considerable effort. The benefits of effective listening include increased patient satisfaction and compliance, increased adoption of preventative measures, increased trust and better client relationships, fewer malpractice claims, more job satisfaction, and better staff productivity and teamwork. Dysart's 2011 study analyzed client communication in small animal practice. Specifically, how often veterinarians solicited the client, asking why they were bringing their pet to the doctor that day. This is an article that I discussed during a second-year lecture course to students in our professional communications course. In this study, only 1/3 of appointments contain a solicitation, such as, "What brings you in today?" Half of clients were interrupted while speaking to the veterinarian, and the average time to interruption was 15 seconds. Not surprisingly, clients that were solicited were 4 times more likely to ask a question or express a concern at the end of the appointment. This can be frustrating for both the client and veterinarian because there's little time left to explore this new information. So some barriers to listening: time, a big one. Patience, repetition of the day, saying the same thing over and over again, multitasking, not being fully present, thinking ahead to diagnostic or treatment plans, or interrupting with solutions, distractions, and stress. There are a variety of listening modes that we can use during the process. So hearing or receiving raw data, selecting, choosing what we want to hear, evaluating and analyzing or judging the information, remembering, drawing upon our memories, attending and focusing our attention, understanding or assigning meaning to the information, and finally responding by giving feedback during the conversation. Try to think about the goals of your listening. Are you listening to win, or thinking that you're wrong and I'm right? This assumes that I have the right answers. If you're thinking to fix, you're also assuming that you have the solution to the problem, not the person with the problem. But finally, listening to learn is reflecting to deeply understand without judgment and intentionally watching your assumptions as you listen and obtain information. Mindful listening is difficult. So hard to listen on purpose, in the present, and without judgment. To stay attentive, make eye contact, take notes, and minimize distractions. Think about your nonverbal communication, maybe nodding along with them, your body posture, how close you are to them, or their nonverbals, facial expressions, their tone and speed of voice, or maybe they're standing away from you. Suspend judgment, focusing on what's being said to gain understanding. Formulate a response after, not while a person is speaking. Be empathetic and keep an open mind. Paraphrase their information and emotions to reflect. Notice the name and name the emotion, using a phrase like, "It seems like you're angry." Ask an open-ended question like, "What led you to that conclusion?" for understanding. For clarification, ask, "What did you mean by that?" You can also use probing questions such as, "What seems to be working well?" And then finally, summarize their key concerns. During an appointment, mindful listening with clients would look like this, starting with an open-ended question like, "What have you and Fluffy been up to since her last visit?" Actively listening, screening for additional concerns by asking, "What other concerns do you have?" And then finally, summarizing their concerns and setting the agenda. At the end of the presentation, we practice our new listening skills in the following exercise. We're told to think of a time in our veterinary career in which we were not heard, seen, or respected. Then we paired up and took a few minutes to share our story. The listener was instructed only to listen or ask questions for clarification and to avoid thinking about ways to fix the situation. And then we switched roles. It was really hard to just listen for understanding without formulating or offering advice. I recommend you practice this exercise with your classmates or coworkers. You could also practice this exercise with your family or partner. Alyssa Mages is the Chief Visionary Officer of Empowering Veterinary Teams, a consulting group that provides comprehensive training to improve the culture and efficiency of veterinary hospitals. To be a leader for change, you need to identify your core values and join aligned organizations or in affinity groups. You need to find your just cause, a past experience or feeling that guides you toward an ideal future. Develop a mission statement that channels your vision and identifies your individual or team purpose, values, and goals to guide you toward your just cause. Heartstorming or tapping into your emotional intelligence helps generate and prioritize ideas. And finally, take care of yourself, focusing on the parts of you that aren't associated with veterinary medicine. This will allow you to be more resilient and better able to bounce back from difficult situations. Get uncomfortable, be vulnerable, be open to change, be bold, and network. Set realistic expectations for yourself and your team. Set and maintain boundaries to protect yourself and your team. And push yourself and your team, but stop just before reaching the limit. And then to embrace your leadership, think about what your leadership path should look like. Who do you want to be as a leader? What will you do? How will you sound? Make sure you lead by example. Talk the talk and walk the walk. Be involved with your team. And sometimes you want to give the group pizza when you're having a bad day. It's not going to solve every problem, but it can help. As I said before, I would have been perfectly content to stay in my room getting pizza delivered and binge watching Showtime, but I needed to network. So I forced myself to go to the mixers and I had a great time. I met veterinary students from Tuskegee, Cornell, Western, and the UK. I chatted with some of the keynote speakers and presenters. I also met Dr. Jose Arce, the AVMA president. I finally met Dr. Valerie Marcano of Plausibility and Melody Martinez of the Multicultural Veterinary Medical Association in real life. When online ordering wasn't available for my dinner one night, I had a happy accident and was invited to have dinner with some other attendees. I made meaningful connections with other people and have expanded my professional network. Being a leader requires a commitment to self-development and self-reflection. I gained valuable communication and conflict management tools. And it was really nice to see the AVMA making tangible efforts toward representation and DEI initiatives. I actually had fun networking and look forward to seeing many of these people in the future. So I would encourage all of you to go to the VLC at least once in your career. It takes place in Chicago in the first week of January every year. And I know it's really cold off Lake Michigan at that time of year, but $99 a night at the Marriott Magnificent Mile is an amazing deal. And it's so close to shopping and restaurants. You wouldn't even technically have to leave the hotel thanks to delivery apps. So please look into getting a scholarship at your school. There's one for every US veterinary school, and I encourage students to apply. I really want to thank you all for listening, and I'll open the floor to any questions, or you can email me. And then after this, I'll advance to the financial resources page and share a couple of things in the chat. So this is Dr. Carey's Getting Comfortable Being Uncomfortable Allyship Padlet. And then let me see if I can put in the document for the communication assessment. So yes, okay. And then this is a conflict management styles assessment quiz. So you can go through that, maybe takes about 5 or 10 minutes to go through that, and then you can see the different management types. Okay. And then for these financial resources up here, the AVMA Personal Finances is a Facebook group. They have the Debt-Free Vets Facebook group for veterinarians and students. Dr. Kim and Dr. Affelt are both financial counselors. Dr. Kim is also a wellness coach who provides free consultations. The Florida Veterinary Advisors, they do a free consultation as well. With the Total Planning Veterinary Services, they provide insurance, benefit negotiations, resume writing, interviewing, and practice purchase resources. And I believe they also do provide a free consultation. So some really great resources from the AVMA. And any questions?
This is not a question, just a statement that I'm very grateful for all of the helpful information that you've given us this evening.
Thanks, Shonda. You're welcome. Kennedy said in the chat, great presentation. Thanks for sharing. You're welcome. All right, well, if anyone has any other questions, you can feel free to email me, hedgehog831@aol.com. But I really thank you for coming in, hanging in there, and I'll see you around.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks, Safari. Have a good night, everybody.